We're taking an in-depth look at how Mike Babcock has used his defensemen throughout his coaching career. That's today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Hayden Houshorn. With me is my co-host, Jay Foster. We're here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of your favorite team and ours, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get going, we want to thank you for making this your first listen every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and the Sirius XM app. Zach Werenski made some comments after his beer league game this week to Craig Mers from NHL.com. He had a chance to grab this quote from Zach regarding his thoughts on the Mike Babcock hire, which now that we're a month in, it's kind of settled for people. I talked to this guy who is a friend of mine and who at first was not excited about the Babcock hire, and he had all of his reasons. But now that it's settled in for a month, he's kind of thought about it a little bit more, and he's warmed up to the idea already. But let's hear exactly what the players have to say, because again, Zach Werenski skating at the Cap City Elite League this week was pretty awesome to see. And of course, tons of people from Columbus came out to watch him play and watch other players play. And a lot of media members came out as well. And Zach was nice enough to speak after the game to some media guys. And he was asked about Mike Babcock and kind of his thoughts on that hire. We know he's obviously for it just because where Zach Werenski's from. He's from Grosse Pointe, Michigan, probably grew up a Red Wings fan, and, probably really likes Mike Babcock because he won the Red Wings Stanley Cup back in the day and whatnot. But here's what Zach had to say on Mike Babcock. He said, "You want your coach to fire you up and get your group going in the right direction." I think he's done that already from a month being here. So everyone's really excited to get to camp and get going and get a fresh start to the season, end quote. Pretty good stuff there. I mean, it doesn't erase all that happened in 2019 with the falling out from the Maple Leafs and that quote unquote bullying incident. I mean, that's just the best way to wrap it up. He was a bully in Toronto. But when you see a quote like that, Jay, do you think everyone on the team is fired up, or do you think this is maybe just a Zach Werenski? Zach Werenski's just fired up and he's speaking on behalf of everyone. But we know different players come with different playing styles. Do you believe him when he says everybody on the team is fired up for Mike Babcock?
I think no is the short answer there, but I don't necessarily think that's anything to worry about. As far as I understand it, Mike Babcock is kind of taking it player by player, and he's speaking to the bigger guys on the team first. So he's spoken to Johnny Gaudreau, he's spoken to Boone Jenner. Obviously he's gone out and spoken to Werenski, and he's probably going to make his way down the list. So I suspect we'll probably see more quotes and articles like this kind of as the summer goes, as guys get back into town, as Mike Babcock talk to them on the phone, or I believe Werenski went out to Babcock's place because he lives in Michigan in the off season, and they just hung out there. What I do think is interesting is when they announced the hire, there was a quote. I don't know what the exact quote was, but someone talked about how Kekalainen had gone out and spoken to the veterans on the team before hiring Babcock. And now it kind of seems like it's coming out. I know Johnny Gaudreau went on record as saying he was wary initially, but now that he's spoken to him, he feels fine about it. So I think it's interesting that they're saying, oh, well, we talked to the big guys before hiring him. And now it kind of feels like it's coming out of actually, this is the first time that a lot of guys are kind of hearing about it and getting to have their say, which I think is interesting. I'm still not convinced by Babcock. I think he's doing and saying all of the right things, but I also said that about Brad Larson a couple of years ago. I kind of will wait to see what the results are before I really kind of pass judgment on how Mike Babcock is for this team, I think. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still kind of wary about him. And I do think that, people can grow and change, which I believe, if I pull the article up, Werenski also said that. I think that's out the window. I don't think guys have any second guesses on it. I think guys are excited. Seems like talking for the guys that have voted already. Everyone came away fired up and ready to go. I'm not as worried now as I was when they initially hired him. But I think because of who players are and because of the kind of I don't think there are players out there that are worried about Babcock coming in and bullying them specifically. I don't think anyone's sitting there and being like, man, I hope he doesn't come in and terrorize me every single day, because I don't think that hockey players think like that. If I thought about it, my guess would be that hockey players are like, yeah, Mike Babcock can win us games. Let's go. Which is probably the right attitude to have. I think coming in with a positive attitude about your new boss is probably the right way to go about things. So I'm not worried necessarily, but I am not surprised that every player is speaking out about how he's getting them fired up. I don't know. I've said this basically every time about Babcock's squad on this podcast. Prove me wrong. I would love to be proven wrong. Show me that you have grown and changed and learned your lesson from the way that you interacted with players in both Toronto and in Detroit, because, it goes all the way back to Detroit. And I believe all the way back to even coaching when he was with the Ducks in 2002, So we'll see.
Yeah, it's a huge we'll see. And in fact, all we can do is really compare the footprints he's left behind and try to predict how those are going to match up with what he's working with in Columbus. I'd actually like to do that, and we will here in just a second. First, I want to tell you guys about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Take a swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel. You get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. You just put $20 into the account, and you'll land a $200 bonus bet. It's pretty awesome to use when you put money in and you just get all this extra money on top. $200 in bonus bets. That's money that you can spend betting everything from money line to over under to who you think is going to hit the first home run in a game. You can bet the over under on strikeouts for a pitcher. You can bet, no runs first inning. That's a big bet that me and my buddies like to take a lot because baseball games can be kind of boring sometimes. But you can do it all on an app that's safe and secure and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get that $200 bonus and bonus bets. That's right. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. $200 in bonus bets, all that you can use on Major League Baseball. All right, back to the conversation. We're talking about Mike Babcock. He's coming to Columbus. The conversation specifically today is about how Zach Werenski made comments, and we're doing our season reviews on defensemen anyway. So I thought it'd be a really good idea to take a look at, well, actually, Jay thought it'd be a good idea to take a look at what Mike Babcock has done with defensemen in the past, including, the Ducks, the Red Wings, Toronto. I don't know what you have specifically, Jay, but I'm very intrigued to hear kind of the numbers that you found when talking about what Mike Babcock did with defensemen at other places. And what did you find?
So first off, I took a quick look at the Red Wings numbers, but also that's so long ago. I went all the way back to 2005, which was his first season as the head coach. And Nick Lidstrom was still playing in that season. He averaged 28 minutes a night. Averaged. So it's the way that people utilize defensemen in the NHL as a whole has changed a lot since then. It's very much it's way more balanced, and so I took a quick flick through the Red Wings up to 2015-ish. You go to 2008. Nick Lidstrom is still playing an average of 25 minutes a night. Brad Stewart is playing 24. Nick Cronwall playing 23. So they really are running 4 defensemen at that point, and then the other guys get a look in. It goes down. Nick Cronwall only played 48. Oh, that was the lockout shortened season, the 2012-2013 leading ice time score. Leading average ice time was 24 minutes. in that season for the Red Wings. So like they're still at that point in hockey generally. They're still basically running 4 defensemen and still kind of taking pride in this. Oh, we have a guy that can play 30 minutes a night easily. Then you look at the Leafs, and it's way different. So the first season that Mike Babcock was coaching the Maple Leafs, they had their top 6 defensemen in terms of average time on ice were Morgan Riley, Matt Hunwick, Dion Phaneuf, Jake Gardner, Roman Polak, and Martin Marincin. All of those guys played under an average of under 24 minutes a night. The highest was Morgan Riley with 23-13 was his average, which is still a little high for my liking, but I feel way better about that. And then as you kind of go through and look at how the ice time kind of changes, then it gets a little bit different. Morgan Riley's average drops down to 22-10 the season after that. The season after that, it's at 22-31. After that, it's at 23-07. This is all Morgan Riley. He's been leading the team in ice time for basically the last 10 years. And then it's tough to kind of look at the 2019-2020 season because A, it was cut short. And B, it was he got fired halfway through. So it's tough to look at that and say what he had an impact on and what he didn't. Morgan Riley, for what it's worth, played 24-12 on average over 47 games in that season. Then you go ahead and you flip over to, I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at people at the minute, but I will, I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail in just a second. Season before last, the 2021-22 season, Zach Werenski played an average of 25 minutes and 39 seconds on average. Vladislav Gavrikov was just before that with 22-17, Andrew Peak at 21-28, Jake Bean at 20-34. And then Adam Boqvist, Brad Larson really did not like Adam Boqvist. He played an average of 17 minutes 2 seasons ago, and then this season he played an average of 18-38, which feels real low to me. This season, the Blue Jackets had their top 4 defensemen were Zach Werenski, Vladislav Gavrikov, Eric Branson, and Andrew Peak. Obviously, Werenski only played 13 games, but in those 13 games, he had an average of 23-35 ice time. And that is, well, A, it's a small sample size, and B, I'm just pulling up what Werenski played in terms of time on ice the game he got injured in, because I feel like it was a real early on in the game. He only played 6 minutes in the game he got injured in. The games before that, he played... Oh, God, there we go. The games before that, he played 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 24, 24, 25, 26, 27, and then he played 28 minutes on November 4th. Like,
wow.
What do we, like, I don't understand how you're going to lean so hard on that one guy, because that was Werenski, I feel like, was the first big injury on the back end. And so the fact that he was already playing that much worries me. And if he hadn't been injured, would he have continued playing that much? Probably. So what all of this means, this is a very long-winded way of saying, I expect the defense to be way more well-balanced this season because of 2 things. One, looking at the numbers, Mike Babcock tends to roll 4 to 5 defensemen way more often. The Blue Jackets, they like to roll between 3 and 4. If I go back to the most recent full season that Mike Babcock coached the Leafs for, their highest, so they had their top 6 defensemen, the 6th guy played an average of 17 minutes and 18. So there's a standard between him and Morgan Riley at 23:07. There's a deviation of about 6 minutes there. When you go and you look at the 6th ice time defenseman for the Blue Jackets, we'll take last season for this because everyone was injured this season, so it's kind of tough to take a real big stab at it. But their 6th defenseman on ice was Boquist at 17:02, and then leading was Werenski at over 25.5. So over a minute and a half more is the spread. So I expect Mike Babcock to play his defenseman way more balanced. And I think also, again, having a pairing like Severson and Provorov will help massively, because that's a pairing that you can depend on. It's been weird the last couple of seasons for the defense with the Blue Jackets, because I feel like since losing Seth Jones, the defense has been swimming. And I don't know whether that's poor defensive structure from the coaching. I don't know whether that's, again, injuries from last season. I don't know whether that's just that they don't have the manpower. But having a legitimate top four this season, I think it's going to make Mike Babcock's job a lot easier, because if you have two pairings that you're happy to throw out on the ice, basically any situation, and that's, in my mind, what your Werenski, whoever, Provorov, Severson pairings should be, I think we're going to see a lot more balance.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And
I think that was a lot of math and talking it to just kind of throw at.
No, that was
people,
fantastic.
Hopefully you guys are still here.
No, that was absolutely fantastic. You laid it out for us pretty good. The conclusion, I guess, out of that was Zach Werenski needs to play a little bit less, and just to keep him healthier, and and then maybe that's not Zach. That's obviously not Zach's fault. Maybe that's not even Brad Larsen's fault, because, as you said, the D core has kind of just been treading water since Seth Jones has left. It felt like, and I wouldn't even say since Seth Jones left, but Seth Jones left. I'd say also since David Savard left. Like it's been tough to get this D core really at a competitive level to where the team can compete and make the playoffs. Like it's not a playoff D core. But now that we're bringing, I like just that you wrapped it up into one name there. Now that we're bringing Provosin in. Now that we're bringing Provosin in, I think this provides Babcock the opportunity to spread it out a little bit more. And I think when you look at what he was working with in Toronto, I can't speak today for some reason, but when you look at what he was working with in Toronto, Morgan Rielly was his best defenseman. I think Morgan Rielly's good.
I was going to say, I'm a big Morgan Rielly fan, as long as you don't make him play defense too often. But like looking at, again, so I'm back in 2018-19 here. The defense core for this team post-trade deadline was Morgan Rielly, Jake Gardner, Jake Muzzin, who I liked a lot, Nikita Zaitsev, Ron Hainsey played an average of 20 minutes a night, and then Travis Dermott was the sixth guy. Like, that's not a great... I think the Blue Jackets right now have a way better D-core than that.
Yeah, I'd actually love to get into that in just a second, so hold that thought. We're going to compare this Blue Jackets team to the Toronto Maple Leafs that Mike Babcock inherited, the Detroit Red Wings that Mike Babcock coached. We're going to do that in just a minute. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. It's time to discuss what this version of an NHL team that Babcock's inheriting, how does it compare to other versions of NHL teams he's been inheriting? Because throw out the jersey colors, throw out the time and the place. At the end of the day, we know that those things don't really, or at least they shouldn't matter into how that team competes on the ice. The players that the Blue Jackets are getting, or the players that Babcock is getting from the Blue Jackets, I think, as it stands right now, should be better than the team that he got in Detroit. And I know that's a huge stretch, because that team in Detroit was unbelievable with Datsuk, Zetterberg, Lindstrom, and then like guys like Brian Rafalski just decided to sign back in Detroit. I think this team in Columbus, Jay, is ready to compete for a Stanley Cup right now. I just think the talent is there. I think it's there. I think the hard part is getting them to play together. And if he doesn't get them to play together right away, I'm just going to straight up be shocked and disappointed in him. And I'll probably call for him to get fired maybe by December if the Blue Jackets are bad. Like that's how much I'm starting to believe in this Blue Jackets team. But Jay, when you look at the roster up and down compared to other places that he's coached, but even specifically the D-core, because that's the conversation today. When you look at this D-core with rising star in Juracek coming into the league, Zach Werenski already here, and then the big offseason moves to get Provison, how are we feeling about what Mike Babcock is being handed in terms of the D-core?
I mean, I in no way would compare. I want to get this out there. I in no way would compare this to the Red Wings teams of old, of Lidstrom and Cromwell and Datsuk and Zetterberg, and like I just checked the defense core for the last year that Babcock was coaching the Red Wings. They had Nicholas Cronwall, Danny DeKaiser, Jonathan Erickson, Kyle Quincy, Marek Zidlicki, and Brendan Smith. Like that, to me, that's still a pretty good.
Yeah, it's very good.
Like they were kind of on the way out a little bit with their like they were all kind of on a downward trajectory at that point, I feel like. But then you look at like I said, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's look at the season that they had when Babcock was fired. Morgan Riley. They had Tyson Barrie that they'd picked up in a trade. They picked him up at the trade deadline, I believe. So he was not. He wasn't there when Babcock was. So Morgan Riley, Jake Muzzin, Cody Ceci, Justin Hall, Travis Dermott, and Rasmus Sandin, who only played 28 games that season. But again, I look at the Blue Jackets right now, and like, I think you put Werenski, Provorov, and Severson against any three of those guys, and I think that's a better team, and that's not even looking at, okay, does Juracek make the jump to the NHL? Does Boquist find another gear? Does Erica Branson remember how to play defense? Like, do I think this team is a Stanley Cup contender right now? No, absolutely not. This team has a ways to go before they get there. Are they a playoff contender? Maybe. I right now, and this is something I've kind of been talking a little bit about and thinking a little bit about, like, what's my best case scenario for the Blue Jackets this season? Make the playoffs. Maybe win a round.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be like disappointed if the Blue Jackets miss the playoffs this season. Unless I will be disappointed if they are a lottery team. But if they finish like 9th in the East, I'm not going to be mad about it. I'll be annoyed, but I'm not going to be like, wow, this team sucks, because they'll have taken a step forward. I don't think you can go from being a team as bad as the Blue Jackets were this season to contending for a cup the season after. I don't care how injured you are. I don't care how good the players that you've gotten are. Like, you don't get turned around that fast. What I want from this season is I want to see progress. Will we get that kind of progress under Mike Babcock? I think we'll find out. Again, it's going to be tough to gauge just how much of an impact coaching has this season, because the roster looks so different, especially on defense, So it'll be, like I said, it's going to be interesting to look back at the end of next season and try and figure out what was going on, and was this just that the Blue Jackets were healthy and had a decent defensive core? Was it Mike Babcock's coaching? I will say that the coach who ran the defense last season, Steve McCarthy, is still on the coaching staff. So we might be able to get in through that to kind of look at how much influence does he have on the defense? Because that's just kind of how the NHL works now. It used to be that the head coach would run everything. Now they have assistant coaches. One guy runs the offense, one guy runs the defense. So I've completely forgotten the name of the other assistant head coach.
For the Jackets?
Yeah. We were talking about hiring him as the head coach, and I've completely...
Pascal Vincent, yeah.
Thank you, Pascal Vincent. I was like, Sylvain Lefebvre, that's a completely different dude. So both of those guys are still here. They're going to be running the offense and the defense. But if I'm Mike Babcock, like, I am keeping a very close eye on Steve McCarthy this season.
Yeah, I want to be clear also when I said in that last segment that I think the Blue Jackets have the talent to win a Stanley Cup. That is a very blanketed statement we media members like to throw out there for any team. Like, well, oh yeah, they have the talent to do it all. It's just I'm not saying that they will do it all. That's genuinely how I feel, though. I think the Blue Jackets are that, that house that you buy for $150,000 that has, good acreage, is in a good location.
Where are you buying a house that only costs
Oh,
$150,000 in this
dude,
economy?
you should see how much they cost in Columbus now. Living in Columbus costs the same amount as living in Los Angeles. So that's kind of how brutal it is right now. But yes, the Columbus Blue Jackets are that house that you buy that has really good bones, and it's up to you to turn it into a $500,000 home if you can, if you have the hands
So what
and
you're
the means.
saying is Mike Babcock is both Property Brothers.
I'm saying Mac. Yes, he's Property Brothers. He's rolling up in his truck. He's got a utility belt on with all of his tools. He got a tool belt on, and he's just like, all right, let's get to work. Like, let's gut the bathrooms. Let's do it all. That's what he's showing up with. And listen, I also think that when you look at Mike Babcock and you look at what he did in Detroit, he didn't coach Johan Franzen to breaking Gordie Howe records. Johan Franzen just went out and did that. Like a lot of things had to go right. He didn't coach Chris Osgood to just keeping the puck out of the net night in, night out. Like he just had really great talent that was there ready to play. And that was a team that came together for a city that really, really needed it at the time. Columbus doesn't really need the Blue Jackets to be good, if that makes sense. Like, going back to our conversation the other day, Jay, about is Columbus a hockey town? It's not necessarily a bad thing to not be a hockey town, because sometimes a hockey town is a state of a city that's doing so bad that they just need the hockey team to be good. I'm making this into something bigger than what it is, but my point is like, what is this Blue Jackets team playing for necessarily? Like, what is their kind of their underlying, like, we need to go win? Like, are they just trying to, is it just, that's just, they're an NHL team and that's just what you do? You just go try to win a cup? I mean, maybe that's a stupid question, but I'm saying, like, what is it about this Blue Jackets team? What is it that's going to bring them together? Is it going to be, Elvis Merzlikins having the year of his life? Is it going to be Patrick Laine breaking, like, Rick Nash records? Like, what is it going to be about this team? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be all, like, we're going to get into the middle of the season and be like, it's Mike Babcock, the one that's changing all this around. I think we will do that a little bit, but I also, like, somebody's got to rise above what we expect them to do. You know what I mean? Like, is it going to be David Jiricek coming in and having an unreal season? Or is it going to be Adam Fantilli coming in and having, going and winning the Calder? I don't know. But the truth is, I think there's just immense talent in this organization. And I just would hate to see it go to waste because a coach comes in and doesn't know what he's doing. But I think as we've looked through how Mike Babcock has managed his time on ice with certain players at other teams, I think we feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, do we feel like Mike Babcock has a better understanding of how to manage time on ice than Brad Larson does yet?
Yes, but that's only because I think it would be hard to do worse. In fairness, like, well, I've talked about it. We've talked about it at length on the show before you jumped on. I had talked about it at length on my own. More so with the forwards because it's easier to kind of find line combinations, ice time for forwards. Natural Stat Trick has a drop down thing, and you can go ahead and you can try and find out what was the most used line at 5v5 for any team at any given season. And this season for the Blue Jackets, the most used 5-on-5 ice time, the most used line at 5-on-5 was Sean Corrali, Eric Robinson, and Mathieu Olivier. And that kind of speaks to Brad Larson's coaching style, I think. I'm really interested to see what Mike Babcock does with this team. Like you said, it's kind of it's not a rundown, abandoned old house, but it definitely, it definitely needs, like, new floors putting in, and someone needs to dig that weird tree out of the backyard. Like, there's some work to be done here. It's a fixer-upper,
Is the tree Eric Branson? No,
I plead the fifth.
This season review's coming up. We'll see then.
But yeah, it's a team that's got growth to do. I'm curious as to how much growing is going to be because of Mike Babcock, or how much growing is going to be him kind of leaving, like hands off, because sometimes trees grow whether you want them to or not. Sometimes, I'm losing control of this tree metaphor here, but I'll be interested to see how much pressure Mike Babcock puts on these players to win, and how much of his job is making them a better team as opposed to a better group of players, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's that one of those things we just don't know. We can only sit here and talk about and imagine, but truly that's the exciting part of an NHL season. Once you get going, the storylines kind of write themselves, and we're going to have a really fun season coming up here, getting into all of it. And I think every Jackets fan feels that way, and they cannot wait to get back into Nationwide in just a little over 70 days here when the Blue Jackets take on the Flyers. That's really cool.
Not all right, counting or anything.
We're not counting. I just gave you something like, I know there's a 7. I know it's 70 something. How about that? I'm never quite accurate with my numbers. 70 something days till the Blue Jackets play the Flyers. Don't count them because you'll go crazy. But I think we made Jay talk about Mike Babcock enough today. He did a really good job laying it out for us, so I appreciate you, man, for that. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, guys. Tomorrow we're going to have a even more fun conversation, I think, as we do a deep dive into the Metropolitan Division. How likely is it that the Jackets land a top 3 spot in that division and make the playoffs? Who are going to be the bottom feeders this upcoming season in that division? Is it going to be the Jackets again? That's all tomorrow. Thank you again for listening to today's episode. Thank you for making this your first listen every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and the SiriusXM app. If you're watching on YouTube, I apologize. My wife is still out of town. Her plane's landing here in about an hour. So I have an hour to shave and clean up all the transgressions I partook in on while she was gone. But you can find the show on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at HaydenH971. You can find Jay on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show on Twitter at LO_Blue Jackets. Is it still Twitter, or is it X now, Jay? I'm sorry.
I will call it Twitter. They will rip Twitter from my cold, dead hands. I refuse to call it the other thing.
Yeah, I refuse to call it the other thing. Well, but thank you once again for listening. Oh, excuse me. If you want to email the show, you can email the show lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening, and until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.